Who are you? That is the question we'll be talking about today. I heard a story recently where a monk asked a reporter this same question, and the reporter had some trouble answering. And the reason why, well, was because he was tending to answer the things we might often say. I am a father or a son. And the monk said, well, that's our role in what we call a family. I might say I'm a healer, or my wife might say I'm a painter, but that's our profession. So then we might say, well, I am Jeremy, or I am Jesse, but that's our name, and our name is merely a noise that was given to refer to what this is. So we might say then more broadly, I'm a man, I'm a woman, but that's our gender and our view of gender. And so we might become so unsure of ourselves at this point that we just say, I'm a human being, but that's our species. And this line of questioning and answering could go on forever and ever until we really feel so unsure about who we are that we feel afraid of having no identity. And this gets to the root of the problem and the question. Because only these qualities that we're talking about, only these identities can change. And so we may feel lost and confused about who we are, that we seek for someone else to just tell me who I am. For God's sake, define me, fix me into this limited perspective, which is identity. And this is what the monk said to the reporter was the world's biggest problem. We cannot answer the most basic question. We do not know who we are, and we let others define us, and we define others, and so we suffer. But, as the Buddha said, to know what you are and what you are not is the key to ending suffering once and for all. That's liberation. But this kind of freedom doesn't arise spontaneously. It requires focus. It requires determination and commitment and responsibility. And it requires an understanding and identity. It requires that we first even ask the question and care to know the answer. Because if we don't ask the question, it won't be answered. And if we don't care or want to inquire more deeply, then we'll continue being confused and suffer. So on the topic of ego, a lot has been said and written that you can already look up, but I will just say that ego is not an entity that has autonomy of any kind, but it's an activity of identifying with something or someone. For example, be it a sports team, a political leader, a cause, which creates an imaginary sense of self. But that is not the self. And it takes a higher level of awareness to transcend the ego's distorted way of thinking so that you can see this insanity for what it is, so that you understand that you've identified yourself with something that you are not, thinking that that is what you are. Because all these things, again, can change, either by your way of thinking changing. For example, I don't care about baseball anymore. Makes me no longer a Red Sox fan. Or by that which you were thinking changing. For example, the cause that you cared about is no longer really a cause. If your cause is save the rainforest and the rainforest is, in your view, saved, well then that cause is no longer who and what you are. And this gets to the idea of outcome happiness, which I have been thinking a lot about lately. It's really the mind's war against reality, wanting things to be the way they're not, wanting things in the future to be somehow else. And it's the voice that always has a problem with how it is here and now, because it doesn't think that reality is giving us what we need. And reality itself becomes the enemy. And so good luck beating that opponent. But it also gets into the belief in control, in doership, in personal, I am by myself alone the one doing, like the wave, thinking that it's waving totally independently of the ocean, and saying, I am waving. How long I wave for, the shape I take, the size, I did that wave. When in reality, no, you didn't. The ocean did. You're just what the ocean's doing. And this is how we are as people. And I like to say when we talk about addictions that we're not really addicted to something like drinking. We're addicted to being a person, which causes us to drink or any other fill in the blank addiction. And if I become addicted to myself as a person, I, the person named Jeremy, am just something that thinks it has control of everything, of reality, when I am just something that the universe is doing. And if I become addicted to my personhood, I become addicted to my conditioning. But did I choose the things that happened to me in my life? To a certain extent, perhaps not. Um, I don't have control over what people say to me. I don't have control over whether I help someone or don't help someone if they don't want to receive. So, really, of the culture that I was raised in, where I was born, I didn't choose every experience I had, and I would have had to choose those experiences ahead of time, um, and then say yes or no to it. So whatever happens in the present moment happens spontaneously, and nobody dictates what that is. For me to say I am the independent doer and controller of life is truly insanity, and it's what drives us crazy. Because thinking that we're the independent doer and the controller of our life, and then when reality opposes that belief, that makes us go nuts, and we drop out of the flow of life, of being lived by life. I don't even know how I'm breathing right now. I just am breathing. I am being lived. And so when you're feeling stressed, afraid, or uncertain, just remember, I am not the doer. I am being lived. And whatever life wants to happen, I remember, I don't determine how reality unfolds. I have no control. And just as I'm not controlling the beating of my heart, it just is beating. And when I fall asleep at night, the activity of my mind, it's similar to reality, how it appears like a physical world from the perspective of a separate subject of experience in that world. But if we just go up one level and consider what appears to us as a physical world is just the activity of a universal mind of consciousness whose nature is consciousness and not matter. It only appears as physical when perceived by the sense perceptions of a separate subject of experience within that world. And that is why the addiction to personhood to the body, to the ego, to the identity, without our awareness of that, becomes immensely painful, becomes a huge source of endless suffering without our awareness of it, of that illusion. And we can become temporarily aware of this illusion and then forget, and then remember again, and then forget, and then kind of vacillate back and forth. But the key, as in Dzogchen, is to remember more and more, and increase our awareness so that it assumes the mind, and our awareness increases rather than us continually forgetting. And in that same way, we of our individual mind appears to itself in the form of that dreamed world I was mentioning. So our awareness appears to itself as the world in the form of the activity of each of our minds. It's only from the point of view of the awareness in the body, the finite mind, the person, Jeremy, that awareness now seems to be limited and temporary. And so that's why we have a belief in death being the end of the truth, which is just eternal, intelligent infinity, of which we are a drop in the ocean, a small part. And this is why Jesus said, I am the Father, and the Father is in me. I am God, and God is me. I am in God. And so this helps us to understand the nature of duality. The conscious mind of the ego is dualistic. It sees itself and everything else as not itself. And while the subconscious mind, the heart, really is non-dual, and therefore sees everything as itself. In my heart, I know everybody is me. But in my mind, in my ego, if I start to get a little addicted to Jeremy, the person, well, I say, well, she's not me, right? That doesn't make any sense to the ego. The thinking mind, the ego, creates its own reality through what it perceives as other, as separate. And so in that way, our thoughts are creating reality, but they're not guiding reality. Feelings guide reality. The heart guides reality. But they don't create reality. And this is because our thoughts tend to judge something as good or bad, right or wrong, based on its interpretation or perception of past experiences and what it perceives as a threat or imagines to be a threat to its safety, i.e. the body, in the future. And it's time we evolved out of this, because paradoxically none of this is real, because the past is no longer here and the future is never here. It only exists within the thinking egoic faculty. And so all fear arises just because of the ego's belief in separation, in perceiving things as other, and in not understanding itself in time and timelessness. And so this is just an incorrect thought, because there is only one ocean, and there might be many waves in that ocean, and those waves might come and go, but the ocean never goes. It just is always there. So this helps to shed a little bit of light on where fear comes from, and where we come to believe that there's a lack of love, for people. And this is just a mistake that needs correction, and love, rather than a feeling of guilt and shame and punishment for not having understood correctly or seen correctly. Actually furthers more separation, because love is oneness. Forgiveness is love, and If what guilt or evil and then you seek to punish it, you're just perpetuating the same separation and insanity. And through such madness, it's going to be impossible for you to ever know peace and happiness. Um, as they say, what you fight, you strengthen. What you resist persists, and so what you judge, you perpetuate. Um, you just create more judgment. And no, I'm not judging anyone who's judging. I understand why that happens, but to know peace, we need to know love and forgive ourselves and others. To devote ourselves to healing rather than punishing sickness and misunderstanding, both within ourselves and without in others, or what we perceive as others. With again that shame and condemnation. We shouldn't be condemning. We should just be correcting in as much as we are capable, in order to raise our awareness of what actually is reality. When we know this truth, we automatically do unto others as we would to ourselves. And we feel love. We don't think love. We feel love rather than judgment in our minds. And this can be very difficult, I will admit, to let go of. We're so used to judging, we don't even see that we're doing it. But what I love, I heal, and I give that love away. But it's not as the ego would have it, that I lose what I'm giving away. When I give love to someone, I'm actually being love myself. I'm actually having love. And so it's not as the ego would think that, if I give you $20, I lose $20. No, actually, I take the wealth that I have, give it to someone else, and spread the wealth. I'm giving, and I feel that we are all wealthy because I know it's the ocean that I'm sharing it with, rather than, I'm making my wave smaller. And so all judgment ultimately is self-judgment. And in order to judge someone, you have to believe that their illusions are real. It's an attempt to make yourself innocent by making someone else look guilty. And so we really need to train our minds, first by unlearning this way of thinking, which has conditioned us and been taught generation upon generation. Then learn a new way of thinking in its place so that we can see through this false identification. And this takes a wiping of the window, because everything looks smudgy and cloudy and we just can't see properly. Our perception is smoky, it's hazy. So if we continue to see without clear perception, we'll continue the old way of thinking. And if we continue that way of thinking, we're just going to continue to be caught like flies in honey through the stickiness of that false identification, and thinking that our false perception, the ego's thought system, is real when it's not. And so anyway, I just wanted to share a couple thoughts with you on that subject. It's an important one. It's one that I think is fundamental to understanding our true nature as divine, eternal beings and expressions of love. And so maybe just sit with that for a little bit. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. My email is cinco.medicos@protonmail.com. And my website is cinco.medicos.com. All right, take care.